The heroin was still warm in Agent Morrison's pocket when he slipped it into Angela Johnson's school locker. It was 7:42 a.m. on a cold November morning. Angela, Bumpy Johnson's 16-year-old niece, had just arrived at George Washington High School for another day of classes. She was a straight-A student, debate team captain, already accepted to Howard University with a full scholarship. She had no criminal record, no history of drug use, no connection to her uncle's business beyond family dinners and birthday parties. But FBI Special Agent Robert Morrison didn't care about any of that. He'd been trying to build a case against Bumpy Johnson for 3 years. 3 years of surveillance, wiretaps, and informants, and he had nothing that would stick. Bumpy was too careful, too smart, too insulated by layers of legitimate businesses and loyal associates. So Morrison decided to get creative. If he couldn't get Bumpy on his own crimes, he'd pressure him through his family. Plant evidence on the niece, arrest her for possession with intent to distribute, offer Bumpy a deal, turn yourself in, confess to everything, and we'll make the charges against Angela disappear. It was illegal. It was unethical. It violated every FBI protocol. But Morrison was convinced he was fighting the good fight against a dangerous criminal. At 8:15 a.m., Morrison and 3 other agents walked into George Washington High School with a search warrant, supposedly based on an anonymous tip that a student was dealing drugs. They went straight to Angela's locker. Principal Henderson tried to intervene. "Agents, this is highly unusual. Angela Johnson is one of our best students. There must be some mistake." "Step aside, sir," Morrison said coldly. "We have a warrant." He opened Angela's locker, reached past her textbooks and debate notes, and discovered a plastic bag containing 2 ounces of heroin. Street value approximately $600, enough to charge her as a dealer instead of a user. Angela, standing 15 feet away with her best friend Patricia, went pale. "That's not mine. I've never seen that before in my life." Morrison grabbed her arm, pulling her toward him roughly. "Angela Johnson, you're under arrest for possession of heroin with intent to distribute." "No, I don't do drugs. I don't know where that came from." He handcuffed her, a 16-year-old honor student, while her classmates watched in horror. Patricia was crying. Principal Henderson was protesting. Other students were shouting that this was wrong, that Angela would never do drugs. Morrison didn't care. He dragged Angela out of the school, put her in the back of an FBI vehicle, and drove her to the Federal Building in Lower Manhattan. And that's when he made his first mistake. He'd let Angela make her one phone call. She didn't call her parents. She didn't call a lawyer. She called her Uncle Bumpy. Hour 2, Bumpy Johnson was having breakfast at Sylvia's restaurant when the call came through. Memphis Red handed him the phone, his expression grim. "Uncle Bumpy." Angela's voice was shaking, terrified. "They arrested me. The FBI. They said I had drugs in my locker, but I swear I didn't. I've never even seen drugs. I don't know how." "Baby girl, slow down. Where are you?" "FBI building, downtown. They're saying I'm a drug dealer. Uncle Bumpy, I'm scared. They won't let me see my parents. They won't." Her voice broke into sobs. Bumpy's hand tightened around the phone so hard his knuckles went white. "Angela, listen to me very carefully. Do not say another word to anyone, not one word. You understand? Don't answer questions. Don't explain yourself. Don't defend yourself. Just sit there quietly until I get you a lawyer." "But Uncle Bumpy." "Not one word. I'm gonna fix this, baby girl. I promise you. Just stay strong for me." He hung up and stood slowly, his face a mask of controlled fury that made everyone in the restaurant go silent. Memphis Red knew that look. "What do you need?" Call Marcus Sullivan. Tell him to get to the FBI building immediately. His client is Angela Johnson, and she's being held on bullshit drug charges. Marcus Sullivan was the best criminal defense attorney in New York, a black lawyer who'd successfully defended dozens of cases against racist prosecutors and corrupt cops. What else? Bumpy's voice was ice. Find out everything about the FBI agent who arrested her. Everything. Where he lives, where he drinks, who his family is, what cases he's worked, what mistakes he's made. I want to know if he takes sugar in his coffee and what time he takes a shit. By tonight. You thinking what I think you're thinking? Memphis, they just arrested my 16-year-old niece, an honors student with a full scholarship to Howard, and planted drugs on her to get to me. They crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. He put on his hat, straightened his coat. They want to play dirty. I'm going to show them what dirty really looks like. But we're going to do it smart. We're going to do it legal, and we're going to do it in a way that doesn't just free Angela. It destroys every person involved in this setup. Hour 6. Marcus Sullivan met with Angela at the FBI building. What he found shocked even him, and he'd seen plenty of FBI misconduct in his career. Angela's arrest was full of procedural violations. The anonymous tip had no corroborating evidence. The search warrant was issued by a judge who was a personal friend of Agent Morrison. Angela had been denied access to her parents for 4 hours despite being a minor. The heroin found in her locker had no fingerprints, not even smudges, which was impossible if she'd been handling it. The chain of custody documentation was incomplete. This is a setup, Marcus told Bumpy on the phone. A sloppy one. Morrison got careless because he assumed no one would question the FBI. Can you get her out? I'm working on bail now, but Bumpy, there's something else. I talked to Principal Henderson. He said Morrison seemed to know exactly which locker to search. Didn't check any others, went straight to Angela's like he already knew what he'd find. Because he did. Because he planted it. How long until she's home? Few hours. I'm arguing that she's a minor with no criminal history, a straight-A student, no flight risk. Judge will grant bail. Good. Keep me updated. Bumpy hung up and turned to the room full of his most trusted people. Memphis Red, his lawyer David Cohen, his accountant Samuel Wright, and 3 former cops who now work security for his legitimate businesses. Gentlemen, here's what we know. FBI Special Agent Robert Morrison planted evidence on my 16-year-old niece to pressure me. He violated her civil rights. He broke federal law, and he did it because he thinks his badge makes him untouchable. He paused, letting that sink in. We're going to prove him wrong, but we're not going to do it the way they expect. We're not going to threaten him or hurt him or do anything that gives the FBI ammunition against us. We're going to use the legal system. We're going to expose him publicly. And we're going to make sure that when this is over, Robert Morrison is in handcuffs. David Cohen, the lawyer, spoke up. That's ambitious, Bumpy. The FBI protects its own. Not when there's enough public pressure. Not when they've crossed a line so obvious that even their own people can't defend it. What's your plan? Bumpy smiled. The predator's smile that meant he was already 3 moves ahead. We're going to turn this into a civil rights case. We're going to make Angela Johnson the face of FBI overreach and corruption. We're going to get the press involved, civil rights organizations, politicians who are looking for a cause. And we're going to force J. Edgar Hoover himself to either defend Morrison's illegal actions or throw him to the wolves. Either way, Morrison's finished. Day 1. Hour 12. Angela was released on bail. She came home to find her parents, her uncle Bumpy, and a house full of people planning her defense. Mamie Johnson held her niece tight while Angela cried into her shoulder. "Baby, it's going to be okay," Mamie whispered. "Your uncle is going to fix this." Angela pulled back, her young face streaked with tears. "But what if he can't? What if they convict me? I'll lose my scholarship. I'll have a record my whole life." Bumpy knelt down in front of her, taking her hands in his. "Angela, look at me. Look at me." She met his eyes. "You are not going to be convicted. You are not going to lose your scholarship. You are going to Howard University, and you are going to become the brilliant woman I know you're going to be. This FBI agent made a mistake. He went after my family, and I am going to make sure he regrets that mistake for the rest of his life." How? By being smarter than him, by being more patient than him, and by using the one weapon he never expected, the truth. Day 1, hour 18. The first call went to Adam Clayton Powell, Jr., the powerful congressman from Harlem and a longtime ally of Bumpy's. "Congressman, I need your help." "What's happened?" Bumpy told him everything. Angela's arrest, the planted evidence, the procedural violations, Morrison's 3-year obsession with building a case against Bumpy. Powell was silent for a long moment. Then, "That son of a bitch, he arrested a 16-year-old honor student?" "A 16-year-old black honor student, to pressure her gangster uncle. How do you think that's going to play in the press?" "Like a civil rights violation, like exactly the kind of FBI overreach that HUAC and the civil rights movement have been fighting against." "That's what I'm thinking." Powell's voice hardened with purpose. "I'll make some calls. NAACP, ACLU, every civil rights organization that's been looking for a clear-cut case of federal abuse. This could be bigger than you realize, Bumpy." "Good. I want it to be big. I want Morrison's face on every newspaper in America." Day 2, hour 6. The story broke. The Amsterdam News ran it on the front page. FBI arrests honor student. In apparent setup, family alleges evidence was planted. The article included Angela's photo from the debate team, her academic record, statements from her principal and teachers, and quotes from Marcus Sullivan about the procedural violations. By hour 10, the New York Times picked it up. Questions raised in FBI arrest of Harlem student. By hour 14, the Washington Post was running it. Civil rights groups demand investigation into FBI tactics. The NAACP issued a statement calling for an immediate inquiry. The ACLU offered free legal support. 3 congressmen, including Powell, demanded that the FBI explain the arrest. And J. Edgar Hoover, director of the FBI, was furious. Day 2, hour 20. Hoover called Morrison into his office in Washington. "What the hell have you done?" Morrison, confident just days ago, was sweating now. "Sir, I was following protocol." "Protocol? You arrested a 16-year-old girl with no criminal history based on an anonymous tip that you can't corroborate. The evidence has no fingerprints. The warrant was issued by your personal friend. And now we have 3 congressmen demanding hearings." "Sir, if you'd just let me explain." "Explain what? That you planted evidence to pressure Bumpy Johnson? That you violated this girl's civil rights because you were too incompetent to build a legitimate case?" "I didn't plant anything. The tip was legitimate." "Then where did it come from? Who called it in? What was their evidence?" Morrison's silence was damning. Hoover sat down heavily, his legendary control slipping for just a moment. "You've handed Bumpy Johnson and the civil rights movement a gift. You've made a martyr out of a teenage girl. You've given our critics ammunition to investigate every arrest we've made in the last decade. You've made the FBI look corrupt and racist. Sir, I can fix this. No, you can't. You're suspended pending an internal investigation. And Morrison, you better pray that investigation clears you, because if it doesn't, I'll feed you to Congress myself. Day 3, hour 12. While the FBI scrambled to contain the damage, Bumpy made his next move. He hired a private investigator, a former FBI agent named Thomas Drake, who'd left the Bureau in disgust over its tactics, to dig into Morrison's background. What Drake found was explosive. Morrison had been reprimanded twice for improper evidence handling in previous cases. One case had been overturned on appeal due to questionable search procedures. Morrison had personal financial problems, gambling debts totaling nearly $40,000. And most damning, Morrison had been overheard in a bar 3 weeks before Angela's arrest, drunkenly bragging to colleagues that he was going to nail Bumpy Johnson by any means necessary. That conversation had been witnessed by 4 people, including a rookie FBI agent who was deeply uncomfortable with what he'd heard. Drake compiled everything into a 60-page report. Bumpy handed it to Marcus Sullivan, who handed it to Adam Clayton Powell, who stood up on the floor of Congress and demanded an immediate hearing. Day 3, hour 22. The House Committee on Government Operations announced emergency hearings to investigate alleged civil rights violations and evidence tampering by FBI personnel in the arrest of Angela Johnson. Morrison would be required to testify under oath in public. So would J. Edgar Hoover. Day 4, hour 48. The hearing room was packed. Press from every major newspaper, civil rights activists, Angela Johnson herself sitting in the front row with her family, her young face showing a mixture of fear and defiance, and Bumpy Johnson sitting in the back, watching everything with those calculating eyes. Morrison testified first. He was nervous, sweating, contradicting himself. When asked about the anonymous tip, he couldn't provide details. When asked about the lack of fingerprints on the evidence, he claimed it wasn't unusual. When asked about his bar conversation, he denied it right before the rookie FBI agent was called to testify and confirmed every word. The committee members were brutal. Agent Morrison, are you telling this committee that you arrested a 16-year-old honor student based on an anonymous tip you can't verify, found evidence with no fingerprints, and then denied her access to her parents for 4 hours? The situation was complicated. Yes or no, Agent Morrison? Yes. And is it true that you have gambling debts totaling approximately $40,000? Morrison's face went white. That's personal. Is it true? Yes. And is it true that 3 weeks before this arrest, you told colleagues you were going to nail Bumpy Johnson by any means necessary? Silence. Agent Morrison, I'll remind you that you're under oath. I may have said something like that, but I was just by any means necessary, including planting evidence on his innocent niece. I didn't plant anything. But the damage was done. Even the committee members who were usually sympathetic to the FBI were shaking their heads. Then J. Edgar Hoover took the stand. Hoover was a master of congressional testimony, usually. He could deflect, obfuscate, and intimidate questioners with the best of them. But not today. Because today he was defending the indefensible. Director Hoover, are you aware of Agent Morrison's previous reprimands for evidence handling? I am. And yet he was still assigned to a high-profile investigation. Agent Morrison's previous issues were addressed through proper channels. Addressed how? By letting him continue investigating cases where he had clear bias and a stated intention to achieve results by any means necessary. Hoover's jaw tightened. We do not condone. Director, a 16-year-old girl with a perfect academic record was arrested, handcuffed in front of her classmates, and held without access to her parents. Evidence with no fingerprints was discovered in a search based on an unverifiable anonymous tip. This happened on your watch, in your bureau. What are you going to do about it? The room was dead silent. Hoover looked at Angela Johnson sitting in the front row, then at the press gallery documenting every word, then at the committee members waiting for his answer. The FBI will conduct a thorough internal investigation, he said finally. If Agent Morrison is found to have violated protocols or civil rights, he will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And what about Miss Johnson's charges? Based on the evidence presented here today, I am recommending that all charges against Angela Johnson be dropped immediately. The room erupted. Angela burst into tears. Her mother grabbed her in a tight hug. Civil rights activists cheered. And in the back of the room, Bumpy Johnson allowed himself the smallest smile. Day 4, hour 72. The charges against Angela were officially dismissed. Agent Morrison was arrested on charges of evidence tampering, civil rights violations, and perjury for his testimony before Congress. The FBI announced sweeping reforms to evidence handling procedures and oversight of field agents. 3 more cases that Morrison had worked on were reopened for review. And Angela Johnson returned to George Washington High School to a standing ovation from her classmates. But Bumpy's revenge wasn't quite finished. Day 5, hour 84, Morrison's trial. The evidence was overwhelming. The rookie FBI agent testified against him. The private investigator's report was entered into evidence. Phone records showed Morrison had called the judge, who issued the warrant 8 times in the weeks before Angela's arrest, clearly discussing the case inappropriately. Morrison's defense attorney tried to argue entrapment, bias, anything to create reasonable doubt. None of it worked. The jury deliberated for 90 minutes. Guilty on all counts. Morrison was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison, the same prison where many of the men he'd arrested were serving time. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. 6 months later, Angela Johnson received a personal letter of apology from J. Edgar Hoover himself, a letter that became a collector's item in civil rights circles. She went to Howard University on her full scholarship, graduated summa cum laude, and became a civil rights attorney who specialized in defending victims of law enforcement abuse. And Bumpy Johnson, he never spoke publicly about what happened, never bragged, never took credit, but everyone in Harlem knew. Everyone on the streets understood. You could come after Bumpy Johnson. You could try to arrest him, investigate him, even threaten him. But you touch his family, especially his innocent, brilliant 16-year-old niece, and he would dismantle your entire career, your reputation, your freedom, not with violence, not with threats, with the law itself. Years later, when Angela Johnson was arguing her first case before the Supreme Court, a reporter asked her about that day in 1961 when the FBI arrested her. That experience could have destroyed me, she said, could have made me bitter, angry, afraid of the system, but instead, my uncle showed me something powerful, that even corrupt institutions can be forced to do the right thing if you're smart enough, patient enough, and willing to fight on their own terms. He taught me that justice isn't just for people with power. It's for 16-year-old black girls from Harlem who refuse to be broken by a system designed to break them. And he taught me that the best revenge isn't violence or hatred. It's forcing your enemies to follow the very laws they tried to use against you, and watching them crumble under the weight of their own corruption. That's the legacy of 84 Hours in 1961. That's the legacy of Bumpy Johnson, a gangster who proved that sometimes the most dangerous weapon against injustice isn't a gun. It's patience, intelligence, and an absolute refusal to let the system crush innocent people just because they're black and powerless. Agent Morrison served 6 years of his 8-year sentence. He died in obscurity in 1979, remembered only as the FBI agent who tried to frame an honor student and ended up in prison himself. Angela Johnson went on to win 17 major civil rights cases, including 3 before the Supreme Court. And every time she won, she'd think of her Uncle Bumpy, sitting in the back of that congressional hearing room, watching justice unfold, watching his plan work perfectly, watching the system that tried to destroy his family instead destroy itself.